If you like listening to Warriors in Their Own Words, check out our other show, the Medal of Honor podcast. The link is in the show description. I'm Ken Harbaugh, host of Warriors in Their Own Words. In partnership with the Honor Project, we've brought this podcast back at a time when our nation needs these stories more than ever. Warriors in Their Own Words is our attempt to present an unvarnished, unsanitized truth of what we have asked of those who defend this nation. Thank you for listening, and by doing so, honoring those who have served. Today, we'll hear from Sergeant Aurio Pierro, who served as a tank commander in World War II. He fought amongst the notoriously difficult hedgerows during the Invasion of Normandy and was trapped in the cellar of a bakery during the Battle of the Bulge.
Well, I was born in 1917. I believe when I was went in the service in January 42, I was 25. Before Pearl Harbor, I was in the selective service system. I had my exam, and I got my classification and was waiting for a order to report for duty at the time of Pearl Harbor. And I got my report, and I was inducted at Fort Devens, Massachusetts on January 15, 1942. I took my 8 weeks basic training at Fort Knox and went to Camp Polk. There, I became part of B Company of the 33rd Armored Regiment of the 3rd Armored Division. And I remained with that B Company until end of my service. When we arrived in England, we were stationed at Warminster, which was, we took that over from a British tank training center. And we were equipped with the M5 light tank, which was the Stuart. And that had been improved from the previous models. We had in that tank a system of balance of the cannon so that you could supposedly fire on the move. And it had automatic drop-type breech so that when you fired the round, it automatically ejected into a canvas bag. So you get ready to put in another round. And in the tank setup itself, in the turret, the tank sat on the right side of the gun was on the left side, and you had forward of the gunner, the driver, and forward of the tank commander, the assistant driver, who, when necessary, manned that 30 caliber machine gun in front of him. And, of course, the tank commander had an added duty, not only commanding the tank, but also to load the 37 millimeter. And I had a driver who kiddingly called me the assistant loader as a tank commander. So, but that was the duty. And of course, that we had internal communication system along with the radio system where we could communicate with the other tanks, and which was necessary because in combat, of course, you wouldn't get out and wave your hand at some of the tank to tell them what to do. So, as a tank commander, I was a sergeant, buck sergeant. The Germans had been at war for several years. They had a chance to improve their tanks, and they had learned. They had, I think, in the Normandy time frame, still some of their smaller tanks, which were even better than ours as far as firepower and protection for the crews because of the thickness of the armor and the high-velocity guns. At that point in Normandy, of course, we have so much forest area that we didn't really have much chance to observe the German tanks. But their tanks, I believe at that point, were not, they didn't have the Tiger tanks or the Panther tanks, which were their heavier tanks. But whatever they had was a lot better than we had. a lot better in the way of muzzle velocity and ability to withstand impact with a anti-tank projectile. That was also evident. Another area where we knew we were outclassed as far as firepower was the bazookas. The Germans had, two types. One is the type where they had a big bulbous-like forward end of the bazooka that they could fire under the arm, and favorite way of doing it was to drop down to one knee and have that bazooka under their arm and fire it. Fortunately, they were not as accurate as the so-called stovepipe type of German, which was very accurate. I found that out later. But in the close quarters, really, the bazookas were something we had to be on the lookout for, even more than the German tanks. They didn't have that many tanks in that phase. There was one hill in Normandy that was held by the Germans, and because of its elevation, of course, they had command of view of a large area, and we had our chance in helping to assault that position. It was really perhaps one of our first major assaults, the platoon, and but it was difficult because the fields, you had a field where there may be low brush, a foot or two, surrounded by high brush of 10, 20, or even trees. So you had an enclosed area, and you didn't know what was beyond the next hedgerow. And all the Germans had to do was to be in the hedgerow part of it and pop out, as we saw I remember that first assault we had there, where for the first time I saw a German come in front of the hedgerow and drop to the knee and fire the bazooka at us. Fortunately, he missed. But that was you couldn't see maybe 100 yards beyond the next hedgerow, which made it difficult to know what was beyond there. And of course, when you're in those hedgerows, you have an area of maybe 100 yards by 100 yards, which would have been probably pasture for the cattle. You didn't know what was going on in the next hedgerow area. The problem, of course, was in the hedgerows. It was elevated land, which was with trees and brush. So it would always be difficult to get up over them. But they designed this plow, really a plow, or prow, I guess, in front of a medium tank to bust through a portion of the hedgerow that would give you an opening to go through on level land, or pretty near level land. And so that was the purpose of that. See, we were the light tank, so we didn't have that push that the mediums had. And what we did they had, because of the bazooka problem, a lot of the tanks had logs attached to the sides and things, and we had sandbags on the front plate of the tank. That was to explode the bazookas if it hit the sandbag, and hopefully exploded before it penetrated the metal. Sometimes we were used as security to protect a building or so forth. And other times when we were moving, we would be with the task force. And our mission at times was, if the lead tank, usually a medium tank, was knocked out, the colonel would call us up to take care of whatever knocked it out. So I know that was several times that was mission that I was on. One in particular, I can think of right now, was where there were, eventually turned out there were 2 88 multi-purpose ND guns that had knocked out the lead part of the lead tank. And Colonel Lovely called me up, take the first platoon on a mission on the left, which was open land. The infantry were going to try to take on the right side, which had some brush and so forth, but our mission was to sweep across an open field to proceed to flank the guns. At that point, I had some infantry I was leading the first platoon at that point. That was in Germany. And I was in the middle going across, and when we raced across with infantry on the back of the tanks, we raced across the field, open field. We didn't know that there was a big ditch in the middle of this field. We hit that ditch, and I remember infantry got knocked off, and I got bumped around a bit. We were approaching the area where the guns were, and it was a little raining, and orchard. And as we approached, apparently the German defenders of the gun thought it wise to surrender, so they surrendered. And I remember there was still one round in one of the guns, and the infantry, of course, got off the tanks. Once we got into the tree area, the infantry got off the tanks to move along with us, and someone got on one of the 88 guns, and good thing it was elevated to shoot the sky, and they pulled the lanyard, and boom, it went off. So, but if they were both working, I'm sure they could have knocked all 5 tanks out going across the field. But they were wise to give up, I guess. You see, in that situation at the crossroads, open land, the enemy was in slit trenches, and light tanks were great because we had the ability to use 2 30 caliber machine guns and a cannon to destroy the Germans in the slit trenches. And that, of course, that was how we did it there. And so I think perhaps visibility was better, light tanks. And in that position, I could see everything. I was a believer in keeping my head up. That was dangerous for the tank commander. More tank commanders, I think, get shot right through the head than any other group of people. But at least we had a chance of seeing what was going on better. Down inside the tanks, you were very limited as to what you could see, unless you moved that periscope, physically moved it, you'd be looking straight ahead. And so with your head out, all you do is just turn your head. And it was a quick way of identifying where the enemy was. And, of course, that's why I did it. There were a few occasions when I had to put my head in, but most of the time I had my eyeballs hanging over the top of the turret. And I attribute a lot of my success in that, really. That was an interesting phase, and maybe I picking that out because of what we ran into at that point. Not only the dug-in infantry, but we were getting anti-tank fire, and we had a German tank come out of that town on the right to come up to reinforce the dug-in infantry in front of us. And as soon as we had cleared the area, I had my tank knocked out there. I got the first shot off at that German tank coming up. But luckily, it was not one of the bigger tanks. And when I saw the bazooka German come up out of his bazooka, he had this stovepipe bazooka, accurate, hit the right side of the tank, but he didn't come out of that foxhole because we poured most of a belt of ammunition in there. Nobody came up any foxhole in front of my tank. And as soon as that happened, and we're close to the road, Colonel Lovely called over the radio, fix Pierro up, and off the task force went down towards Ragoon. So in that particular case, it knocked the track off. I don't know what other exterior damage, but we still used the guns. We couldn't move, but at least we were able to use the guns. I could use the radio. And we're very fortunate if it had hit center, either on the turret or down below where the driver was, it would have penetrated the tank. The frontal part of the turret, where I was, I wouldn't be here today. Yeah. But luckily, it hit the right side, right track of the tank. In the Bulge, we were hit at night at Petit Coup. It was somewhere on the side. It was dark. And I know we had sparks and fumes come into the tank, but we were still able to function. It all depends on where it was hit, but the bazooka, that meant a penetration that could continue on. With a high velocity anti-tank projectile, it would not only penetrate the outer compartment, but go through the tank. And with most of the German anti-tank guns, they could have penetrated my tank from one side to the other and gone through another light tank through that. Yeah. The anti-tank projectile would be just to penetrate, and that would go through any area without any explosive, unless it hit, say, the gas tanks. That was the danger of hitting gas tanks and set you on fire. A couple of times when I got over the radio, my tank was on fire. It was baggage I had in the back of the tank, luckily, that was on fire. That happened in Normandy and later at, I think, Mons, we were mopping up dug-in infantry again. That was our mission in that point, to mop up infantry who dug in slit trenches. And we were, I think, very well equipped for that. But the projectile, being a solid metal part, was built to penetrate. Now, the explosive shells, they would explode perhaps on the outside and explode. But if that penetrated, and is not built for penetration and explosive inside.
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Level up with Gourmet Plus options, prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. Looking for calorie-conscious options? Try delicious, dietitian-approved, calorie-smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. Need an extra boost to support your wellness goals and feel your best as you tackle a busy autumn? Try Protein Plus meals with 30 grams of protein or more per serving. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in our meals. This September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/warriors50 and use code warriors50 to get 50% off. That's code warriors50 at factormeals.com/warriors50 to get 50% off.
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, well, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts, and on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.
We were in Germany. This was we had penetrated the minefield there at the approach to Scheppenstein-Hastenrath, which is east of Stolberg. And we were there when the Bulge started. And we left that area to go down into the Bulge. We got down south of La Glaise, and the main task force had gone further south, down towards Tripon, and the first platoon of B Company was dropped off. The task force commander had, with the medics, had taken over one building, small building, as the first aid station. So we were left behind, 5 tanks at that point, and to just stay in that area, offer some protection. And there were 2 German vehicles knocked out, like in front of the building, and German dead behind on the railroad tracks. That was a place where, coming down from the north, we crossed the river and crossed over a railroad bridge. And then the road proceeded towards Tripon. And at the time, we were not that familiar with the area. It was, we were there for a while. And then in the afternoon, the Germans came over the hill. They came to our north and like to our left, heading towards a place to our north. We saw them. They came down over the hill. There must have been 50 or somebody, or so, that many. And we started to fire at them, the machine guns mostly. And we drifted back to where the bridge was. And apparently that was their objective, because that would be the way over the railroad bridge and over the river. And it was late afternoon, and the bazookas started all around us. So we got back to there, and we stopped. And I radioed headquarters as what was going on. I was told, wait there, and infantry would come up to help us, and we would. And so we spent there maybe a couple of hours. I don't know what time of night it was then. They came up. I took over the platoon. My friend Alfred Bell was the platoon sergeant. He was back at the first aid station. I took over the platoon and led the attack back to the first aid station. And put the platoon in a position where we would fire on both sides of the road at the houses to set them on fire. We get back to the first aid station. I get out of the tank and started with the door. And my friend came to the door, and all I remember was that, don't hurt these German. They were good to them or something like that. And a bazooka hit the tank behind me, knocked me up to the ground. Helmet rolled off, and I had some shrapnel on my back. Went back into my tank and started fire back. And from that point on, for several hours, there was a little high ground on the left side, turned the turret around, and they were firing bazookas at left side from the front. And I opened the radio up so headquarters could hear me. And the tank behind me, there was nobody in there left. And so we fired, we're firing back every time we see a bazooka flash. And we get hit and have the smoke and sparks come in, and the gunner wanted to get out. If he left, there'd be nobody to man the cannon there on that side. So I held them back in, and we kept firing. I guess we almost ran out of ammunition. We finally had to go into the building. And at that point, we were in the building, and the infantry had already been in it. As soon as we got to the buildings, the infantry had gone into the buildings. And so we were up on it was like 1.5-story building. It was, we found out later, it was a bakery, and they had a big oven in the cellar. We got up on the first floor, and we were under attack from all sides at that point. And I recall a projectile coming through the brick wall on the floor. I remember putting my overshoe foot on it to try to put it out. There was no reason for that, but it was just one of those natural things. And so as the top of the building started burning, we had to go down in the cellar. At that point, there were 2 rooms in the cellar. One was sort of a back room there, and the wounded and so forth get in that building, and there was a big oven in the front side. And I remember at that point that one of the infantry took a position on one side, and I took a position on the other side with a Tommy gun, waiting for the Germans to come through. Well, The German had asked us to surrender. I'll call it surrender. We didn't. There was some firing. We were in the cellar until the next morning. And I always believed that the German asked us to surrender was the one was German dead right outside the back door. There was a tank around the back there that the next day I get in there and called headquarters, and I got orders or authority to, the men couldn't stay there any longer. I had to get out. And as soon as I came back in the building, and because the burning had gone down, the first floor was on fire. There was nothing left at the top. And so they started to leave on foot. So we got back down the railroad tracks, and there was firing. We had lost a lot of people outside. Get back there was a medium tank, and told them, what the story was. And as a result of that, my friend, who was still in the building, was brought out. But that took the whole elapsed time was like a day and a half. He had been badly wounded. I don't know if he can show you his hands that were mangled and his other wounds. And I guess he was just out of it after we first got there and in that cellar. He was a prisoner of the Germans. It was so important because that was a place we were supposed to defend. And also, of course, he was still there. And at that point, I'm quite sure we had heard about Normandy. At that point, I certainly was never going to be taken a prisoner. And I'm sure that he would never have survived if left to the Germans. They would not have treated a man that had his arms, almost chopped off and other wounds. They were not going to pay much attention to him. So that just happened to be just one of the incidents that a lot of things happened after that. I think we knew what we had as far as, the tanks, and we were outgunned, and we didn't have the protection. Do it again? I don't know. We were young, and we had ideas, and I guess we were doing a job. And perhaps if we knew more about what they had in the way of their anti-tank guns and in tanks, it would have made it harder. It would have made it harder because they had tanks. The Tiger tank was the size and weight, of what we have today. And they're still the only German Tiger tank that I understand is left, that was a battle tank, is at La Glaise in Belgium. It's in front of the museum in La Glaise. And I understand that it's there because one of the Belgian women, after the battle area left there, was in the field. And she asked if she could have that tank. And it was given to her. And there it is. It's in front of the museum, and it still has the 88. We thought everything about the German equipment was perfect, but it wasn't, as we learned later on. So we probably would have been more frightened if we'd known how powerful they were, really. I must say that it was a very emotional experience for me last year when my friend Alfred Bell came with his wife, and we met. Last time I saw him was in that building at Betty Coo. I hadn't talked with him or heard from him since that time. Yeah. What he did after the war, as he told me, it was before he said, I made my living by the hands. After the war, he couldn't. He went to school. He wound up as a superintendent of a school district in Texas. And he's a nice guy. So And he thanked me before that. That was the emotional part, see. And and I've met a lot of the guys that I hadn't seen for a lot of years, but that was the most emotional one, really.
That was Sergeant Aurio Pierro. Thanks for listening to Warriors in Their Own Words. If you have any feedback, please email the team at kharbaugh@evergreenpodcasts.com. We're always looking to improve the show. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review. Warriors in Their Own Words is a production of Evergreen Podcasts in partnership with the Honor Project. Our producer is Declan Roars. Bridget Coyne is our production director, and Sean Ruhl-Hoffman is our audio engineer. Special thanks to Evergreen executive producers Joan Andrews, Michael DeAloia, and David Moss. I'm Ken Harbaugh, and this is Warriors in Their Own Words.
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, well, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts, and on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.